Hello and welcome back to another video. I'm Zelp and today I'm going to try and share sort of like a finished product of the whole status calculator thing. I'm also going to address some of the comments and answer some questions as well and give you my input. I also want to point out that I'm really sorry that I did not upload for the past 2 to 3 days. The first day was just too hard for me to finish because I had classes till really late. And then the second day my computer had problems. The day after that it was the same thing. And finally today it's a little bit better. It's just that it's not as smooth. It lags sometimes, and every so often when I turn on my PC it just doesn't want to turn on. There's a black screen, and just a few hours ago the whole PC kind of froze and nothing was responding, and I had to force restart it as well. So honestly, I really don't know what's going on, but hopefully we can endure through this whole COVID-19 phase thing and then hopefully get a new one once the lockdown is over. Okay, so let's start. First we have Senna Shin 7MJC. It says finding which multiplier is not really that important since stacking multiplier is the best outcome, but it's nice theory crafting for ribbons. Now to this I would like to say that yes, you are right. Stacking different multiplier will give you a huge boost in damage, but sometimes there are conditions where among all the multipliers you don't have enough slot to put everything in, so you need to decide between different multipliers, and this is where the whole spreadsheet and what I'm doing here kind of makes sense, because you have to compare to see which one is better, and comparing it in game will not be able to give you a visual reading because you can't tell how critical actually give you in terms of average damage. So that's what we did in the video before we started with the viral, and then in the viral video we have an average for the viral proc. So what this means is that you can actually see a figure that you can compare between viral status, critical, and whatnot. But the thing is, when it comes to things like viral, technically your weapon already has that multiplier to begin with, because your weapon has its base status chance, and if you mod it with viral then it would naturally have that multiplier. It's just that the question here is, do you increase that multiplier more or do you not? So in a way it's not about just adding new multiplier, but now we're looking at which multiplier to increase more to get a better overall damage. The next comment is going to be from John Cable. He says, I really appreciate how much effort you put into it, but the test proved nothing. Oh, my heart hurts when I hear people say things like that, like, no, everything you did is useless. Oh, okay, anyway, he says that the higher status chance with viral ramps up in damage quicker, but then stabilize after a few bursts. Since the proc kinda has diminishing returns, the very first proc grants you a whooping 100% damage, which we all know. The more you apply, less overall impact. And okay, so what he's trying to say is that the first proc is what that matters most, and he's saying that just having higher status chance is just going to help you ramp up faster. I really have nothing to say about this because it is true. So next it says that a single proc of viral is worth a lot in terms of overall damage output, but you really don't need to go all out on status just because now viral is good. High status chance works at its best with corrosive and even better with flash. Pushing too hard on viral alone makes no sense. Any other upgrades of damage on your weapon is worth much more as long as you can apply some amount of viral proc. So what he's trying to say is that, you know, you don't have to have so much status chance. As long as you can proc the first proc, that's going to do a lot more than the subsequent procs they'll do, because it increases the multiplier, things like that. So that statement is correct, but then there is this question: how much is enough? He says apply some amount of viral proc, and how much status do I need to get that sum occurring in a way consistent enough that you feel like you're killing at a relatively fast pace? So that's where the beauty of the spreadsheet kind of comes in, because if your status chance is really low, it means that it stretched out a longer period of time before you can hit that cap. Therefore, the starting field hits by right, you actually get a really low multiplier. Now I feel like his point of view is that assuming that you can just proc once, that's good enough. But the question is, what if you proc it at the last hit of killing it? Then viral pretty much did nothing to you. So at this point, at this statement, I'll probably ask him back the question, how much viral proc or status chance for viral should we all consider to be enough? You know, like, is 5% enough? Is 10% enough? Or should it be at least 20? So he continues on to say those are the reasons why with the HEMA test that we did in the last video, the results are so similar even if it's not a critical weapon. Viral is intended to enhance all other damage and buffers you can slap on your weapon. Technically, all multipliers increase everything because it's a different multiplier, that's why they're so strong. He says that it's going to be very disappointing by itself in real game scenarios against armored enemies, but even in tests, if you run the exact same test with 290% element instead of 260, I think those stat mods, you will have a better result even if 90% mods are for viral. So this is the part among everything that he says that could be his own opinion and I should not judge, but at this point he said something that we can test, and so we are going to test it out and see if it's true. What he basically says is that from my testing between 2 dual stat mods and 2 critical mods, he says that it will actually do even better damage if I were to just use 2 other 90% elemental mods. Now when I read this part of the comment, I was a little bit skeptical because what he's pretty much suggesting is that if you increase the amount of a certain multiplier even more, is better than increasing the amount of other multipliers that's already low, which is not the case because when it comes to different multiplier, you kind of want to even them out as much as you can. With the amount of value that you have, you should be able to do even more damage. So just for you, John Cable, I'm going to test your theory and I'm going to do it first with spreadsheet. Okay, so over here we have the spreadsheet. It's a little bit upgraded because I moved some things around. I made it a little bit easier to use as well, and we are going to use it to its full extent later in this video if we have enough time. However, I want to test out his theory first. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to take a look at what is the amount that we have for from our previous video. So when we use 2 critical mods, which is Point Strike and Vital Sense, we get 14.95, and with 2 dual stat mod we got 15.6. That is the total multiplier damage that we have according to this spreadsheet. So now we are going to do the exact same thing, but this time we are going to put in we're not going to put in those 2 dual stat mods, and we're not going to put in 2 critical. Instead, we're going to put in 2 other 90% elemental mods. So that will actually increase my elemental damage to 360% because 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90. So this is how much I'll have. The critical is going to be its default from the weapon. So it's only this amount because the HEMA has a 11% chance of crit and also critical damage only 2. And then for the viral status, we also have to take its default. It has a pretty good, pretty good status at 25%. So what we need to do is we took all the way to 35 hits because this is the amount of hits required in our testing in the last video. So we took 35 hits and then pretty much put this range into this formula thing, and it calculated the viral multiplier as 1.75 or 1.76. So that is what we did. We put a 1.76 here and calculated that the damage is only 14.0. So now if we were to compare this value that we get at only 14.1, we can see that in our past 2 results with critical builds it's 14.9, really close to 15, and then with 2 dual stat mods is 15.7 or 15.6, which is also really high. This means that I can for sure tell you with the confidence that I have on my own spreadsheet that what you said there by having 2 other elemental mods that at 90% is not going to give you the same results. But to prove it, because you know, maybe you just don't believe my spreadsheet is correct, over here we have the HEMA, okay, and you can see that what I pretty much did is the viral still stands, okay, and I added 2 extra 90%. So before we were testing between having these two viral in and then having these two as critical, or having these two as dual stat mods, and which one is better. So he says that I can put any other 2 elements as long as it's 90%, and it will do even more damage. So this is what we did. We put 2 over here. Let's see how much more damage we do. On average, in the last video, we did it on a charger, and it took us about 35 hits, and with I think with dual stat mods, it took us about 31 hits, if I'm not mistaken. So now let's see how many times it takes to kill one. Okay, so again, I'm gonna aim at the exact spot because I don't want to hit any weak spots or anything like that. Okay, so you can see down the screen is 15. We have a total clip of 60, which means that it took us about 45 hits to kill this charger. All right, so let's, because 1 is not enough, you know, sometimes inconsistent. So we have to take at least, I don't know, 3, 4, 5. I paused that a little bit. This one went all the way to 12. This means it took us 48 hits. Okay, again, I need to click as fast as I can so that it's somewhat, so that the viral does not expire. All right, again 12. So it's again 46. Now again, remember that the HEMA shoots 3 at a time, so we are looking at a plus minus 3 hits ish, right? Okay. Oh, this one was actually pretty good. 24, right? So 24 is how much? 36 hit. So that is a really lucky one. The last one. Oh, 21. So that will be 39 hits. So it's still definitely a lot more hits, which means that my damage is actually lower and it's not higher. Okay, so with that said, John Cable, apparently that part of that statement is incorrect. I do want to point out that it's okay to make mistakes, or maybe I misunderstood what you're trying to say. Let me know more down at the comments. Okay, finally we have Crisis 044. He has a purple heart next to his name, which means that he's an OG here. He's gotten a lot of hearts from me. So that's also one way I can tell if you have been around in my channel for a really long time and you've been commenting. Now this is that there's 2 issues with this test to get accurate results. You can increase the status duration and use valve precision to get clearer amount. Okay, so for this statement, he says use increase status duration, which makes sense because the whole reason why I have attack speed on my HEMA is because I want to attack quick enough so that the viral proc does not expire, so we can actually compare with what we have in the spreadsheet. Technically it will expire, but then you're still looking at around, you know, 10 to 9 procs off and on, so it doesn't really differ that much. So by increasing the status duration, I also do not allow it to expire that quick, and then we can do a better comparison. So yep, that is true. Nobody builds like this. Oh, what do you mean? Because that's 4 of the same elements mods on a single weapon. I don't know what to say about this, because I do feel like a lot of people would do that, because especially if you want to put more weight on a certain element because you want it to proc more often, or let's say you're fighting against a boss and let's say it's weak against radiation, because you know when you're fighting against a boss, you can't do any saves procs on it. So technically, depending on what kind of weapon that you're running, if it doesn't have critical or something like that, you actually end up with a lot of free slots. It's better to go for a elemental damage multiplier where it has that health modifier. Anyway, he continues on saying most builds have serration, split chamber, fire rate, faction mods, 1 element, 2 element, 2 critical mods. And then he continues to say if the weapon does not have enough base critical, then you can actually use other 2 elements for replacing it, like the dual stat mods. Now the thing that he just mentioned is also, I believe, mentioned in the last video, if not maybe the video after that, before that I mean. So yes, Serration gives you that damage multiplier, which is separate multiplier. Split chamber is multi-shot, which is also separate multiplier. Fire rate though, it's very subjective. It depends on the type of weapon. If your weapon do not have good ammo efficiency, having fire rate on is just killing your weapon sooner. Or if the weapon has a really long reload time, then you're actually going to experience more reload time throughout the game. And that's going to hurt your DPS as well. So personally, I don't always mod for fire rate. It really depends on what kind of weapon. Like I don't mind it on the Supra because it has really good ammo efficiency. But for most of my weapons, I don't actually get fire rate on them. And then next you have faction mods, which is also, like I mentioned before, at the early start of this game, it's really good. It does most likely going to increase your damage against the correct factions. The problem is it's very tedious to always have to change depending on the factions. And personally, I don't use faction mods unless I'm really sure that I'm gonna grind a specific map over and over again against the same boss type or enemy type. So let me know down in the comments how many of you guys actually uses faction mods in your daily grind in Warframe. So just like that, there are kind of like 2 mods in the list of multipliers that he's given that I don't really use, and that kind of opens up for more space for elements. And then after that, he also mentioned that you have at least 2 elements, which makes sense. And finally, it says the 2 critical mods, which also makes sense. So if the weapon is not a critical type weapon, I find myself have a lot of space to stack on elements. And if I were to stack on elements, I'll definitely go for things that I want to proc more. So there will be repeating elements. But my final output on this entire statement is pretty much that the reason why we did a viral only weapon is because we want to see clearly what does the viral able to do. We don't want to have other other influence or other variables into our system, because in the last video we are also trying to test and prove that the spreadsheet works, and so far the spreadsheet is only able to take into account status for viral. So if we were to put other things that proc other status that will alter the damage or kill the enemy quicker, then we cannot test and see if our spreadsheet is correct. So that is actually one of the main reasons why we did a viral only. Now then he continued on to say that critical needs headshot, because when you do a crit on a weak spot, you actually do additional damage, and that is really good for critical. So technically you might be able to outplay a lot of other multipliers if you have critical on headshots. Now, but the thing is, I feel like it's not good for testing. Now the reason why is because how more often do you think you're going to get a headshot over all the other parts? Because the weak spots are usually smaller than the overall body. And so depending on your ability, I guess, and also the type of weapon, because some weapon has high recoil and things like that, you might find yourself more often than not hitting the weak spot. So that is why I purposely pick a spot, a consistent spot that I keep on shooting, which is the charges, but over and over again to make sure that I don't hit anything else that may be a weak spot to change the values. Okay, so now the next part is that he says that with 2 90s, adding to dual stack gives you 67% damage boost alone. Critical only boosts you by 41%. And I feel like this is the part where I have a question. I did reply to him. I asked him how did he get these values, but sadly he did not reply back. So I'm still wondering, because I feel like the values there, especially for the critical, may not be accurate. So I really would like to know his input on how did he get these values. And for the last statement, he pretty much just said overall just make a formula that accounts for viral damage multiplier over number of hits. And that's what we've been doing the entire time. Okay, so at this point, I feel like it's clear to me that either a lot of you guys do not understand what I'm trying to do, or you don't foresee how this is useful. Now this is where I feel like it kind of reminds me of that link that I posted in the YouTube community, which is basically a story from Bill Nye. And for those that have seen it, yay in the chat, no I mean yay in the comments, let me know who you are. So it's a very interesting story. Basically, it's talking about an invention that was discovered a long time ago, where people do not see how important it is until now. When you look back, it's like without that simple invention, we don't have everything like around us, everything is made because of that invention. I feel like it's a waste if most of you don't understand what I've pretty much created over the past few days, over so many hours of trying. So I'm going to give you another example, right? And this I'm gonna use a weapon that has more than just one status. But I don't want to put in too many status because that's just gonna make things really complicated.